Good morning, friends.
Good morning.
Usually with computers, they say that it improves with every generation. But I think it's the other way around here. So fifth generation doesn't necessarily mean an improvement over the first. With what's going on in this world, there's so much of pressure on the outer life that the inner life needs more attention. I must thank your section for having me and my wife over. And as I always say, there are two things. One is thank you for putting us up. And second, thank you also for putting up with us. Because we are quite demanding and we want the air conditioning to be turned off and all kinds of things. I was in Finland recently and with Sister Maria and the group there, also in other parts of Europe. And they asked me something. They said, have you ever been in a sauna? Because the Finnish love sauna. I said, yes, all my life. And with that comes attached the invitation, come to Adyar. Because Adyar is the master's home. And the heat kind of purifies everything. Of course, my wife keeps joking that this is a winter gathering during the summer season. And I'm often reminded of what a friend of mine says, that he's from the industry of air conditioning. He says that most often that the thin dividing line between air conditioning and refrigeration disappears. And then you're kind of frozen. But it's been so warm and the people have been so nice to us, and I see all those bright and smiling faces that I feel encouraged and happy. I have one request to make. I know that you're all excited and your minds are already 2 hours into the future. But it would be a good idea for us to be together this 1 hour. I have what is called a captive audience. Unless you choose to escape, that's the gate. And for those of you who didn't sleep well last night, in acupressure there's a point here, you rub it vigorously and you'll keep awake during my talk. You wouldn't need to. But on the other hand, if you would like to speak, I would think that you are in meditative silence and I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. You wouldn't need to do that during the Dalai Lama's talk, because from what I have seen of him from my childhood, it's going to be one of the most fascinating experiences of your life. This morning, we are here to talk about the subject, as our friend said, a very kind introduction he gave me. It's called the Obligatory Pilgrimage. I can promise you the subject is very interesting, but I cannot say that the talk will be. That's for you to decide. I'm trying to stick to the script as much as possible, as I did in Europe, because here there are no translators required, but I gave them a difficult time in Europe by being so indisciplined as not to stick to the script. The master once wrote, there are more ways than one for acquiring occult knowledge. And he quoted from the book Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. He said, many are the grains of incense destined for one and the same altar. One falls sooner into the fire, the other later. The difference in time is nothing. He says, so remarked a great man when he was refused admission and supreme initiation into the mysteries. Now, the great man he refers to is Marcus Aurelius, the great Roman emperor, and the grains of incense are each of us on the obligatory pilgrimage. Now, this particular term, obligatory pilgrimage, is from the poem of the Secret Doctrine. And I'm sure that most of you are aware of this book and have been studying it in Wheaton. And I must congratulate you that after more than 120 years or 130 years, you're studying this wonderful book which is relevant even today. H.P. Blavatsky speaks of the obligatory pilgrimage. And when I was a boy of 14, or maybe 15, I attended what is called the School of the Wisdom in Adyar. And Joy Mills, an American, whom you all know, a well-known American, was the director. And she was very kind to me, and she was the one who first taught us what the obligatory pilgrimage was. It's something which I learned in my teens. And then she said, now Maithreya will present the paper on Parabrahman. I said, that was the highest honor, but I tried to do my best. I looked at letter number 10 of the Mahatma letters, and most of my talk was that. Now, what does she say? She says the fundamental identity of all souls with the universal oversoul, the latter being itself an aspect of the unknown root, and the obligatory pilgrimage for every soul, a spark of the former, through the cycle of incarnation or necessity. She says incarnation or necessity, in accordance with the cyclic and karmic law during the whole term. Brothers and sisters, every word here is pregnant with meaning. She speaks of reincarnation as a necessity, and she speaks of one law, cyclic and karmic. So don't miss what she says. Then she goes on to explain what she means. She says, in other words, no purely spiritual buddhi, that's the divine soul, can have an independent, conscious existence before the spark which issued from the pure essence of the universal sixth principle, or the oversoul, has A, passed through every elemental form of the phenomenal world of that manvantra, the cycle of manifestation, as you know, and B, acquired individuality first by natural impulse and then by self-induced and self-devised efforts. And then she says again, checked by karma, thus ascending through all the degrees of intelligence, from the lowest to the highest manas, from mineral and plant up to the holiest archangel or Dhyani Buddha. Now, what is also important is to note that no one is exempt from this obligatory pilgrimage. She is unequivocal in making this point by saying, the pivotal doctrine of the esoteric philosophy demands no privileges or special gifts in man, save those won by his own ego through personal effort and merit throughout a long series of metempsychosis and reincarnations. Personal effort. And the Master says at a place, no effort is ever lost, but the result may change according to the circumstances. And if you understand, this is true. Sometimes you think you're failing, but sometimes you wonder why you succeeded. You got to put the two together. This takes us to matters pertaining to karma, and therefrom to what is the right way of living. The right way of living, very important. This is more important for the pilgrim to understand than float on metaphysical clouds, seeking nirvana and speculating what it is. The pilgrim has not experienced moksha or nirvana. He only has word images. In fact, in today's world, I'm afraid, in most cases, neither the teacher nor the taught seem to understand that the race for nirvana or moksha is indeed an exercise in futility. The cunning peddle it in the spiritual marketplace, and the credulous lend themselves to being cheated. The voice of the theosophist is drowned among the cries of the vendors of psychic experiences. There are many of them. The higher the price tag, the quicker you reach nirvana. If you don't, bad luck, no refund. And the guru is gone. So you have plenty of such people. There are people who think that they're channeling. There are people who think that they can raise the kundalini. There are people who think they can get you to nirvana through shortcuts. There is no shortcut. Prescriptions for shortcuts and instant results, each with its own unique selling proposition. In marketing you have the USP. Seem to have the attention of the wavering pilgrim. When somebody dies, when a relationship is broken, you want comfort. And many who want comfort, they look to people like you. And if you're not around, they get cheated. So it's time, as the Master said 100 years ago, it's time that Theosophy entered the arena. It's your responsibility to be available when the soul sick need you. The task of the Theosophist is no easy one. It is said to be lonely, and there is but a forlorn hope. Yet the satisfaction of speaking the truth amidst the dissenting voices of the world is the only reward. Your duty is your reward. No recognition, no importance, no limelight. Those are incidental, maybe accidental. But the satisfaction of doing your duty, brothers and sisters, that is what we need to look for. On the obligatory pilgrimage, it's important to throw the seeds of practical wisdom among the seekers. Now, when we talk about practical wisdom, a lot of people think it's being shrewd. It's not about shrewdness that I'm talking about. It's not about worldly sagacity that I'm talking about. I'm talking about what is practical and how it can be practiced. The practical wisdom cannot include speculations on nirvana or moksha. Rather, it has to do with a mindful and meditative way of life. It has to do with compassion to all, in all that we do. Compassion in everything, in the way you move the chair. Whether you're parking your car on a patch of green, whether you're riding your bicycle on a line of ants, this is mindfulness. Whether you're compassionate to the tomato and the orange that you're eating, or do you just think it's something to consume quickly? Do you have time? That's where it begins. It has to do with compassion in everything. If you look carefully, a mindful and meditative life is indeed a compassionate life. If you truly love something, you will pay attention to it. For those of you who've gone through this experience, your first date with the person you loved would have flown like that. Why? Because you were in love. You said, time flies, it's so short. And yet, when we were waiting for the plane in New York, John F. Kennedy for Chicago, time seemed to stretch into eternity because you didn't like the wait. You wanted to go to Wheaton and settle down in the Joy Mills building. There was no time. And so time stretches when you don't want it to. But if you love, and indeed if you love the wait, if you love every human being in the airport, time would not have stretched for us. You understand? That's where we fail. This attention is not fragmented and divided. It is whole, unadulterated and undiluted. It is an attention where the subject is fully involved with the object. Such an attention is indeed a challenge to the separate identity of the subject and consequently the object. It is a challenge to the passage of time. It is a challenge to the familiar working of the mind. Anything short of this attention is fragmented. Now, what is wrong with living a fragmented life? In a fragmented experience, there is a separation between the subject and the object. This separation is an expression of duality and not unity. And duality is the principal characteristic of the world of causes and the resultant effects. If there's unity, there's neither cause nor effect, because the two are one. But if there is duality, there's a cause and there's an effect. Huh? Making sense? Yes. It sustains the cycle of cause and effect. Duality in its very nature separates. It creates the pairs of opposites. There's good and evil. There's happiness and misery, which in reality there isn't. But once you move away, then there is. Everything that's relative becomes two opposites. It holds you. It holds the performer of the action to samsara. Samsara means this worldly life. In colloquial language in the South, samsara means family. But actually, it's not about family. We love our families. But this is about worldly life. The world, samsara. It literally means the world, the worldly life. The generation of each new cause is another step on the pravriti marga. The pilgrim will wait another day in samsara. What is the pravriti marga? There are the two paths. The path into the worldly life, which is the pravriti marga, and the path of return, which is the nivriti marga, which we as Theosophists claim to be treading. But whether we keep jumping tracks is a question we need to ask ourselves. Pravriti marga, nivriti marga, pravriti marga, nivriti. So this doesn't help, Master says, he says. Even, calm, contemplative state of mind, that's meditative, that's mindful. Now in life, we are constantly making choices. And you all know about At the Feet of the Master, Viveka Chudamani, and all those very, very important books which speak of Viveka or discrimination. They help us, this helps us in two ways. Viveka helps us in two ways. Discrimination helps us in two ways. At first, it helps us to make the right choice between the right and the wrong, between good and evil, between the impermanent and the permanent, so on and so forth. But later, Viveka actually helps you to go beyond your choice. Viveka is born out of constant mindfulness. If you are not mindful, there's something in you that makes a choice, but the choice is made. There's no point in shutting the stables after the horses have fled. So the choice is made. So unless it becomes a part of one's nature to be mindful, there's always the lurking danger of making a wrong choice. Clarification of motives is an exercise that precedes discrimination. Very often, even if we know what to do, we do not ask ourselves why we are doing it. You know you have to come to the summer gathering. Did you ask yourselves why you're here? You got a mail and you knew how to do it. You knew what you were doing. But believe you me, most of us don't ask, why are we doing it? And if you ask that question as to why you're eating something, why you're driving a car, why do you read a book, then the answer seems to be a little different. It opens up more things. There are two forces that act when we clarify our motives, and this is from management. These two forces that act are the restraining force and the driving force. There's something that restrains you from doing certain things, from making a certain choice, and then there is a driving force. Maybe very subtle, but it is there. The former is the voice of the conscience, developed over lifetimes. It says, don't do it, don't steal, don't indulge in adultery, don't harm another sentient being. And don't say something that's nasty, although you're irritated. That's the voice of conscience. Don't take money which is not yours. Don't escape taxes under the cover of interpretation and tax planning. Yeah? Tax planning is not part of the divine plan. When you plan your taxes, just make sure that the motive, the clarification of motive, very important. So, it is called by the master the whisperings of the buddhi to the manas, which means that the oversoul whispers to you. It whispers to you when you are silent, when you wake up, when you are in meditation. And that is the truth. But if you suppress it, and you refuse to listen to it because it's not going to tell you what you like, then you will not hear it too often. Then you will hear the sound of your mind. And we all love the sound of our mind, however fake it is, however false it is. It tells you that the right thing will happen instead of the right attitude that you should have. It is like connecting to the intelligence of the universe. And the universe is intelligent. It is a cosmos and not a chaos. Let's look at one example. Have you ever heard of planets colliding into each other because of absent-mindedness? I'm sure you've heard about cars colliding into each other because of lack of mindfulness on the road. But you always think the mistake is the other man's. He was not mindful. It always takes two hands to clap. In a mindful life, you are responsible for every person you meet. So there is no accident without your compliance in that. So if one connects to this inherent intelligence resident in the buddhi, the choice will always be the right one. If one looks further, one learns that not only is it important to make the right choice, but we go on to the second qualification, that is vairagya or detachment, non-attachment, desirelessness. So it says not only should you exercise discrimination, but also exercise vairagya and detach yourself, your little self, from the choice you have made. If one attaches oneself to the choice, even if it is the right choice, it becomes tainted with the motive of the self. I donated. I am a member of the Theosophical Society. I am good. I. There's so much of I that the right choice is tainted with the self. I'm better than those materialists outside. Separation. I am those materialists. There's no separation. He's not a terrorist and I'm not a theosophist. When I treat my subordinates, my servants, my family badly, I am the terrorist. And that is the root of terrorism, which culminates in those dirty explosions of bombs. So if you kill the terrorist in you, you have corrected the terrorist in someone else. But if you sustain it in you, in the thoughts that you generate, because you're a powerhouse of thoughts, then he's got power, because you're releasing it into the atmosphere in your own way. Virtue and merit are intrinsically pure. In a way, they are impersonal. You can't say, I am good, there is goodness. The minute you say, I am good, the goodness disappears, if you notice carefully. There is goodness, there is purity, but it's not the I that is good or pure. The minute the I attaches itself, the goodness disappears. I love. You always say, I love you. So, I'm still different from you, but I love you. I don't believe that. The motive of the self would only leave them tainted. How does one detach the self from the choice? When you make a choice, how do you detach yourself from it? We are in the midst of the battle of life. When you turn at the feet of the Master, he says, waiting the word of the Master, watching the hidden light, listening to catch his orders in the very midst of the fight, seeing his slightest signal across the heads of the throng, hearing his faintest whisper above earth's loudest song. When I was 10 years old, my parents gave me this book, and I used to learn this with them, like many other things that we used to learn. And as I grew older, the meaning became more evident. The childlike poem became more meaningful. So how does one detach oneself from the choice? We are in the midst of a battle, as I said. Perhaps we may find an answer if we understand a particular statement in the light on the path. It's not one statement, it's a set of statements. Mabel Collins, through whom it was given, writes, "Stand aside in the coming battle, and though thou fightest, be thou not the warrior. Look for the warrior, and let him fight in thee. Take his orders for battle, and obey them. Obey him not as though he was a general, but as though he was thyself." Who is this mysterious warrior? How do his actions not attract karma? Does he not generate causes that bind you to samsara? Is he within, or is he without? Or is he everywhere? To recognize the mysterious warrior and the actions of this mysterious warrior, one needs to understand another paradox. And this is from the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita literally means the Lord's song. And it is the conversation on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, which is an important part of the world's largest epic and India's second epic, the Mahabharata. And it is a conversation between Krishna and Arjuna, his disciple and brother-in-law. To recognize the mysterious warrior, you listen to Krishna. He says, "He who sees inaction in action and action in inaction, he is wise among men. He is harmonious even while performing all action." Well, if this was translated in today's world, particularly in America, you would say, "He is wise among humans." So you will put up this men business in my talk because I mean women and I respect women, even though I may not mention it in that way. Sometimes it's easier to read the translation as it is. So we must pay attention to the key words even while performing action. So the Mahabharata is the epic which I was talking about. And I don't know whether most of you are aware that our motto, Satya Nasti Paro Dharma, is taken from the Mahabharata. It is a motto it was the family motto of the Maharaja of Benares or Varanasi, and he very graciously donated the motto. You know, very often one might say, what's so great about donating a motto? It doesn't cost anything. That's not the right attitude, because he gave his family motto and it became the motto of the Theosophical Society. It's inscribed on the Ramnagar Palace in Varanasi. And when the founders went there, that was a gesture from his heart. And dharma doesn't just limit itself to religion, although we call it, there's no religion higher than truth. My Indian friends will agree that dharma means much more. It means duty, charity, so many things. It's your dharma to do that, okay? So the high point of this epic is the Bhagavad Gita. It is the conversation, as I said, between Sri Krishna and Arjuna. And there is a peculiar interpretation to this epic. I will not go into the details of that because many of you may not be familiar with the epic. But in this, Sri Krishna is the God within, is what you would call the master within. Arjuna is the aspiring personality who looks for the teaching. They say that there are two ways in which the Bhagavad Gita was communicated. One was directly to Arjuna, his disciple, and the other to the blind king Dhritarashtra, whose sons were fighting, the bad cousins were fighting the good cousins. And it was given by a man called Sanjaya, who had distant vision. And that is symbolized by the Antahakarana, which is the bridge between the lower quaternary and the upper triad. So Sanjaya was that link, and the blindness of the personality was Dhritarashtra, the king, who had become king after his brother died, and he was blind. So look at the symbology of it. Sri Krishna asks him to abandon all tradition and relationships and come to him, because the battle was between cousins. And Arjuna was distraught. He said, how can I kill my teachers and my cousins? So, symbolically, Krishna says you have to destroy all tradition. Images of your teachers, words, everything, destroy it. We recall here the Mahatma's statement in the letter. He says, let those who desire to learn abandon all and come to us, instead of expecting or asking or expecting us to go to them. What does abandoning mean? Does it mean that we desert all our loved ones, leaving them nothing, and abstain from performing our duties? Does it mean that we do not fulfill our responsibilities? It takes us to a serious question about discipleship and the obligatory pilgrimage. We think we are responsible. We think we are duty-bound. It may not really be the case. There's certainly intent in living one's life with integrity and rightly. Notwithstanding, one is often confused, lost between what one knows he has to do and what he or she actually does. The motive of the self creates the chasm between aspiration and practice. So if you look at it, all of us have good intentions. We all know that there's no religion higher than truth. We all know about universal brotherhood, leaving aside the other two objects. For example, one moves from loving someone to using someone. When the relationship begins, you say, I love you. And after some time, you start using that person. One turns from charity into benefit for oneself. What is my tax exemption? When will you put my name on the board saying donated by? Working for a cause ends up in exercising of and controlling resources. In the beginning, you're working for a cause. And after some time, you tell everybody, don't move that mic without asking me. Don't put this table here without telling me. So this is dangerous. And this happens in daily life, but it has to do with our spiritual life. A lot of people tell me that I live two lives. My business, which is now almost disappeared, and then my theosophical life. If you compartmentalize that, it will never work. If you are not theosophical in the way you do business, then you will not mean business when you talk theosophy. You have to live one life. You might play different roles, but you cannot be a split personality. Now, when you look at this approach to life, it's like wearing colored glasses and seeing things. It creates images of people and circumstances in our minds. It creates images based on opinions and prejudices, which are like phantoms in our mind. We program ourselves to be either attracted or repulsed. We can never draw ourselves, and these are based on our fancies and antipathies. It's either what they call in yoga raga, attraction, or repulsion. I like this, I don't like this. I like this, I don't like this. So, if you look at this, it's like the binary system of computers. It's either 0 or 1, 0 or 1. You keep choosing. You don't want to pull out of that. But this choice should not be confused with Viveka, which I spoke of earlier, because Viveka is proactive while Raga and Dvesha are reactive. Think about it. Viveka has to do with a need-to-do choice. Raga and Dvesha have to do with nice-to-do choice. The latter is a choice that strengthens the little self and keeps us immersed in samsara or the worldly life. To abandon all would mean to abandon the motive of the self in what we do. Look at the animals. They function in a no-knowledge world. We function in a knowledge world. Man in Sanskrit means mind, manushya. Okay? So we function in a knowledge-based world. The adept functions in a non-knowledge world. It's beyond knowledge. Okay? We don't understand that, so we won't dwell on that. So the animals function on a need-to-do basis. Hence, there is no evil in what they do, although it may seem apparently so. When a lioness or a tigress kills, you attribute motive. It doesn't have a motive. Its fifth principle is, in fact, dormant. However, all forms of life have to pass through the human stage. And again, we go back to the secret doctrine. There's a metaphysical reality. People change every myth into an anthropomorphic conception. And Madame Blavatsky, during her lifetime, tried to clarify as many of these as possible. There are many myths in Hinduism, many myths in Buddhism even, and in Christianity. And here, she talks about who we are, about the good and evil in us. She speaks about Satan and the fall of angels, the fallen angels. What does that really mean? She says, thus esoteric philosophy shows that man is truly the manifested deity in both its aspects, good and evil. But theology cannot admit this philosophical truth. Teaching the dogma of the fallen angels in its dead letter meaning, and having made of Satan the cornerstone and pillar of the dogma of redemption, to do so would be suicidal. Having once shown the rebellious angels distinct from God and the Logos in their personalities, the admission that the downfall of the disembodied spirits meant simply their fall into generation and matter would be equivalent to saying that God and Satan were identical, for since the Logos or God is the aggregate of that once divine host accused of having fallen, it would follow that the Logos and Satan are one. And they are in you. When you do good and when you do evil, don't separate yourselves from these, because they are in you. And it's that transmutation, that alchemy, that turning of the lead into gold, that would make you understand that this whole cosmic drama takes place in you, not outside. Therefore, with man and woman also begins and ends evil. Here begins the problem of choice. It is this, if this choice is only between what the self likes and what it dislikes, we create more karma in each choice. More karma, more cause, which will give effect. We can begin to understand that Viveka takes us to that which is choiceless. So it not only makes you, facilitates the right choice, but takes you to the realm of choicelessness. It puts to rest the mind. In the very second aphorism of the Yoga Sutras, what does Patanjali say? He says, Yoga has chitta vritti nirodha. And Dr. Tymon translates this. He says, this has many translations, but not very different from each other. He says, Yoga is the inhibition of the modifications of the mind. The inhibition of the modifications of the mind. And H.P. Blavatsky says in that valuable gem, The Voice of the Silence, he says, the mind is the great slayer of the real. Let the disciple slay the slayer. She's not advocating insanity. On the other hand, she says that the obligatory pilgrimage takes us beyond the mind. The Bhagavad Gita speaks of the 3 yogas, very holistic in their approach. And if you look at it, every religion, including esoteric Christian religion, esoteric Hinduism, they have this in them. What are the 3 yogas? Bhakti Yoga, the path, the yoga of devotion. Jnana Yoga, the knowledge, the yoga of knowledge. And Karma Yoga, the yoga of action. Now, some of us belong to an order for children, and we've kind of grown old in that. It's called the International Order of the Round Table. How do you teach children Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Karma Yoga? If you use such words and tell them about all this, they'll run away. If you tell the youth about the Secret Doctrine, they will come one day, but if you start with that, they'll go away. So what do we say? The salute before the empty chair of the king who is your ideal man is heart and head and hand. Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Karma Yoga. Okay? I will do it with my heart, with all the devotion, with my head, with all my knowledge, and with my hand, all my actions. So the salute is before the empty chair, the chair of the king. The neophyte at his initiation, as a page into the order, is informed by the officiating knight that the king is the ideal man within whom we serve with heart, head, and hand. The true theosophist, I would venture to say, is a yogi. And occultism, as different from the occult arts, there is an essay on this. Madame Blavatsky has differentiated the so-called psychic powers. She speaks of the Guhya Vidya, the Mahavidya, and then she goes on to the Atma Vidya, which is what we are concerned about. Occultism, as different from the occult arts, is Raja Yoga, as revealed by HPB, the royal root. Our learning and pursuit should not be for psychic powers. Our learning too is not merely for intellectual accomplishment. Now, in the doctrine of the heart, which somebody mentioned yesterday, I think it was Ed who was talking about the doctrine of the heart, that we choose to follow, I think you said this also, it is soul wisdom that we seek, not mere head learning. We are not looking for the eye doctrine, we are looking for the heart doctrine. And there's a peculiar instruction that H.P. Blavatsky gives in Practical Occultism, that little book, very valuable book. Everybody says the Theosophical Society does not prescribe a system. Yes, we do not, because we are not dogmatic. But H.P. Blavatsky in that little book says how we should live our lives. And one of the things she says, and it's very strange, she was a lady who wrote so much, 12 to 14 hours, maybe more each day. But what does she say? Look at this. She says, do not read too much. If you read for 10 minutes, reflect for as many hours. Habituate yourself to solitude and remaining alone with your thoughts. What does she mean? Reflection in relation to what? It must be about how we read, what we read and how it applies to us in our daily lives, in how we are living it. In Sanskrit, it is called Swadhyaya. Swadhyaya literally means self-study, objective and subjective. The master recommends in another context an honest and open-minded examination. So when we do a mirroring exercise, it is very revealing. We realize how much is left undone in our spiritual life. The Raja Yogi is one with his feet on the ground but his head in the heavens. His practice of yoga has much to do with the antaranga, or the inner part of the eightfold yoga. Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. The 8 parts of yoga, eightfold yoga. You see, it's very intelligently done. You don't begin asana or the exercises before you comply with the do's and don'ts, yama and niyama, the moral and ethical ground. And then, for Theosophists, it's not Hatha Yoga that matters. It is Raja Yoga, which consists of the 3 parts. The other 5 are called Bahiranga, or the outer part of yoga, and the last 3 are called Antaranga, or the inner part of yoga. And what do these 3 consist of? Antaranga is a threefold journey from concentration through meditation to trance-like samadhi. It consists of dharana, concentration, dhyana, meditation, and finally samadhi, or what is roughly translated as trance. The last of the three is further described as being threefold: sabija samadhi, nirbija samadhi, and what the Jivan Mukta passes through, which is called dharma mega samadhi. Now, let's not go into the meanings of all this at this moment. The classifications in terms of words would only be head learning. Okay? So if I started discussing dharma mega samadhi in this audience, I would be a fool, because it doesn't make sense to any of us except that it's a word. So the classifications that go on are not important. Samyama really involves a paradigm shift in perception, and samyama is this part of yoga which is concentration, meditation, and then samadhi, or entering into that. Samyama involves a shift in perception, perspective, experience, and evolution. Very important, because after that, and when you have experienced the final samadhi, even the seed or the potential to do wrong and create karma is destroyed. Because you are no adept where somebody tells you that. There are lots of fancy adepts floating around in the marketplace who sell their pictures and things like that. But the true adepts, they don't do all these things. They don't even come out. The master writes, the real knowledge here spoken of is not a mental but a spiritual state, implying full union between the knower and the known. You know, Patanjali says, Kshana tatakram yoha samyavada vivekajam jnanam. He says, meditate on the moment and you'll become one with the moment. Last night we were talking, very often we talk about time. Krishnaji spoke of psychological time and chronological time. I would say there is egocentric time and chronocentric time. Egocentric time is when you say, when this event comes, I will do this. In 2 hours from now, Wheaton will come, and after that, something else will come. But me, I am permanent. I am where I am. Wheaton comes, events come, everything comes. Look at the usage of words. It's very egocentric. There was a time that the world was geocentric. And you see how foolish we look in retrospect. So maybe sometime this egocentric approach to everything, including time and space. And you know, to ask the question, which is the center of time, which is the center of space, where do you think it is? It's where you are. Because space has its center everywhere and its circumference nowhere. And time has eternity at both ends. So wherever you are, that's why don't waste this precious moment. It's not the present, the past, or the future. Because the past is all that you know. And you know it from memory and impression. The present doesn't exist, because by the time I've spoken to you, thousands of nanoseconds have passed before your mind processes it. And the future, it's an imagination based on the past. You know, you believe that you will see the Dalai Lama. Okay? But, of course, when you look at it through the senses, it's like this. You look into the night sky, you see objects in the sky which have existed and perhaps do not exist since the beginning of the earth itself. So it's all the past. So really speaking, the Ribhu Gita, the Mahatma letters all speak of the now. Eckhart Tolle speaks of the power of the now. I don't know in what context. But the now is beyond the past, the present, and the future. Very often inquirers are of the mistaken impression that obligatory pilgrimage is carried on in steps or stages. They also look at the result of great learning. Some think it's a matter of chance that one stumbles on extraordinary experiences. If it were so, the moral and ethical considerations can be thrown to the winds. Samyama in its description may seem like a technique. Attaining samadhi might, listen to this carefully, it might seem like a technique. But in fact it is not. Neither is Antaranga or the inside yoga a methodology. It's not a prescription. It cannot be given to you by anybody. It's something inside. This is a great lesson to learn. It's very misleading to look at a prescription or a description. That's why the Buddha never described nirvana. It is merely a hint that may provide the key to the intuitive pilgrim on his obligatory pilgrimage. Out of the compassion for the pilgrim, the bodhisattva or the master halts his absorption into eternal nirvana or bliss. He watches on the pilgrim like a mother, a compassionate mother. Each individual is an evolution of its own. Each must find his or her own way. Each must fight his or her battle with the self and its living wall of lust and passions. So this moral and ethical aspect is elaborated on at the very beginning by Patanjali. Yama and Niyama precede the other steps and are part of the Bahiranga, or the outer part of Eightfold Yoga itself. Karma has the key to nirvana. Until the balance is reached, nirvana is but a concept. If it is a pursuit, as the great adept says in his letter of 1881, it's a selfish pursuit. The Jivan Mukta who has passed through Dharma Megha Samadhi has destroyed the very seed and potential for evil, as I said. Dr. Thaimini in his commentary says the Jivan Mukta cannot, after passing through Dharma Megha Samadhi, the final Samadhi, and attaining Kaivalya, or the realization, again fall into avidya or ignorance and generate karmas that bind. He cannot do it. The potential is gone. Viveka, Vairagya, Shat Sampatti, Mumukshatva. Discrimination, desirelessness, good conduct, and love are the four great qualifications prescribed, I say, it's the wrong word, suggested, recommended by Alcyone in the At the Feet of the Master. But there's a very curious translation. Discrimination, desirelessness, it's conventional. Good conduct, 6 points of good conduct, conventional. But when it comes to mumukshatva, it's not conventional. Master has departed from that. The great adept translates it knowingly as love. And this is where stands the authenticity of the At the Feet of the Master. So don't ask, did Krishnamurti write it? Did he go in his astral body? Silly questions. Please don't ask them again. Okay? It doesn't matter whether he went walking to Tibet or he flew in his astral body or whether Leadbeater took him or not. How does it matter? Are you interested in spiritual development or are you interested in theosophical gossip? The two are contradictory. There is no such thing as theosophical gossip. It's just plain gossip. So some of these things about delving into history is not important. As Krishnaji himself said, if the postman brings you a good message, do you kiss the postman? Maybe he would like it, but you don't often do it. So, mumukshatva, this is really interesting, very important. Mumukshatva literally means an intense desire or longing for liberation. An intense desire or longing for liberation. What has that got to do with love? Think about it. It sounds like a personal pursuit. That's why Master shifted the meaning. Therefore, it is deliberately hinted by him that the final and most important qualification is love, not running after nirvana. Do you understand? So we are faced with the biggest question of all. It stares us in the face, and in it lies the answer to, is Raja Yoga finally love? Is occultism finally love? Is Samyama finally love? Is the doctrine of the heart finally love? Is the obligatory pilgrimage finally a pilgrimage of love and compassion? The answer, my brothers and sisters, is in you. You know it. What is love? Is there love in our lives? Do we understand love? Paradoxically, you know what love is not. But do you know what love is? You may see acts of love. You may hear words of love. You may feel the touch of love. But do you know what love is? We speak of the first object of the Theosophical Society, universal brotherhood without distinction. it is about love and compassion. In effect, it is love for all sentient beings. At another place, the Mahatma writes, the first object of the society is philanthropy. The true theosophist is a philanthropist, not for himself, but for the world he lives. We speak of meditation. We even claim to practice meditation, whatever that may mean. Somebody asked Krishnamurti, sir, how to meditate? And Krishnaji, as far as I remember, said, sir, don't ask the question, how to meditate. Ask the right question to ask is, what is meditation? Because meditation is not a process of going from one place to another. It's all the time. To meditate is to love. Love is in the here, to live in the here and now. Love does not generate a cause. Love is not the result of a cause. Where there is true love, there is neither duality nor the motive of the self. That is why they say God is love. Or, brothers and sisters, should we really say love is God?